of the issues like toxic tort and contamination, infrastructure development, which I mentioned, and eminent domain, and the many other issues that surround sort of the eventual takings or degradation of air and water quality. So we continue to discuss the best way to use Ravel, and we invite you to discuss that with us and other tools to develop this institutional knowledge and an optimal platform to share it across organizations. So as we develop that, I'll give you a run through of Ravel. As I understand it, I've had some time, and Hannah unfortunately couldn't be here, but she's had some time to really look through some of these, the positive aspects of Ravel and some of the real advantages of it. You know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with legal research software, so I'll try to point out some ways that it's similar and different from others. But it really does, it's got a very different feel to it, so I'll walk you through that in case you are familiar with those, or if you're not familiar with that type of research platform at all. So this is the main login screen for Ravel. I've already typed in hydraulic fracturing just for later use, but as you can see on the top left, this is the cases that have been starred as important, annotated, or tagged. In the bottom, and these are the different labels for different tags, and you can tag cases with that. On the bottom left, you'll see all the new releases because Ravel is in its nascency, so things are changing. It's starting to, as it says there, fix bugs, etc. Bottom right, you can see recent activity. As you can see here, we've been going through a lot of cases and in preparation for this, but it's a good way to track what you've done, kind of like a history in some of the other ones. In the center, you'll see a list of cases that you've starred, and you can print a report of starred cases from the workspace itself by clicking on this report button, and we can look at that a little bit later, but it generates a PDF of all your starred cases. And you can do this for a list of cases that you have tagged with a specific term, so you can click on one of these specific terms and it brings up the cases that you have tagged. And as you can see, there's sort of cross-reference tags as well. So on top of the workspace screen, you have the search bar, and that's kind of where you prompt to start really doing all of your searches using a Boolean guide. So let's start with, we can start with any search term, but first let's look at how that would work. So the search bar prompts you as you start typing, and as you see here, when you click in there, the Boolean guide, there's a drop down here. It's pretty standard. If we start typing in a term, if I spell it correctly, you'll see a drop down list of opinions. If we keep typing, we can put in fracturing here. We can click on map cases once we actually go to do that search. So what we'll do first is see what kind of, now we're not going to do any court filters, but let's see what this brings. So if we go to find courts, we can, as you can see, we can do specific federal courts, the circuit courts. We can click on a particular state. If we click on that particular state, for example, Pennsylvania, it'll bring up all the different, court of common pleas, the appellate courts, and of course the Supreme Court. If we unclick that, let's see if we can clear this. And again, we can do related. Let's see, so we'll do PA, and then we can do related federal. There we go, and that will bring up our related federal courts, the district, the Eastern, Middle, and Western District, Third Circuit, of course. And then we could include bankruptcy cases. I never recommend that for anyone, those of you familiar with bankruptcy law. So that's a really nice and fast way to navigate that. So again, if we click out of find courts and we just go into a search term, let's see if I can get this in there. So if we go into hydraulic fracturing, just for example, a very narrow term really, and we click map cases. So I've already done that, so we won't have to wait for that. So if we go in and we map cases, you'll see that all of these bubbles represent individual cases. Now, here with this hydraulic fracturing in quotes, obviously it's more limiting, and that's true for any of these Boolean searches. You know, there's a lot of ways to expand or contract the different terms and how much you get, how wide of a net you cast. I always recommend casting a wider one at first. So if I were starting this, I would not use the quotes. If you don't do that, you get more like 800 opinions for hydraulic fracturing. But just for the sake of this demo, let's keep it to that. So we put that in quotes, and you can see, you know, this is organized by court. So we have state, district, and circuit courts. And let's click here on relevance. So if we click on relevance, obviously it moves the field, and it brings, by and large, the larger circles to the top. So the larger circles represent, let's say, more relevant cases that are the most cited opinions. This one. We can also look at the legend. So if you see here, the Supreme Court's dark blue, circuit courts are the brighter light blue, and then this pale blue is a district court, and then the palest blue is state courts. And then if you look at the line, the green line is cited by, so all these opinions here that are pointing to Coastal Oil and Gas Corp cite it. Cite to Coastal Oil, and then Coastal Oil cites to these other cases here. And you can obviously see this where it's situated on the timeline. As you can see below, there's a timeline down here. And you can also look at the numbers of opinions over time. So as you can see, since approximately 2009, there's been an enormous uptick in cases. The other thing worth mentioning is, as well, this doesn't have over 200, but in a lot of these screens, if you have 1,000 results, you will not see 1,000 dots on here. And usually, and perhaps Kyle can talk about that later, usually you have to go into a tighter resolution over time. So you'd have to pick, like, let's say, a 10-year window to observe every case within that 10 years. So let's see here. On the right, you can see this is your case name drop down. So let's go to one of these cases. So let's see. So this would be Coastal Oil. So when you do click on that case, you'll get into Coastal Oil. You can do that obviously for each one. You can scroll down and see some of your most cited cases here, because it orders them in that. And you can see here one of your top cases is the EPA. You can also filter out for more cases. So as I said before, if this is not a particularly wide net, but if you want to get more specific, you can search more Boolean terms right here. You can search for other motions. This is a really interesting little gadget that Ravel has that lets you obviously search through motions and decisions if you're looking for something particular, which is real interesting. You can search by topic. This is something else Kyle can talk about a little bit, but this delineates cases by topic. And then, of course, you can look for different statutes down here. And then this is a quick date search. You can either look across and you can see how far back this case law could potentially go, but you can pick a particular date if that's what you have in mind, or you can do 5, 10, or 20 years. So you can do a from to date as well. Excuse me, bear with me a moment. So if we click on to categorize by mining and oil, it's going to narrow, and we hit apply, it's going to narrow our opinions to 45 opinions. And then let's go back and clear these. So let's do a different type of filter. Let's filter for a particular search term. So we have in hydraulic fracturing, let's look for trespass. So we hit return, that puts us up in the active filter, and then let's apply that filter. And we still see here one of the major cases that and has trespass in it as a term is Coastal Oil. So let's take a look at that case page again. So here you can see that, this is the site. We've tagged this in 2 different categories. Here's the opinion history. This is very interesting because it tells you how many times in a particular year. So in recent years, well, it's in 2008, but in recent years, it's been cited to quite a bit. It has your law firm analytics. You can see here the firm analytics is coming soon. This is law firm analytics. We'll see in another case that you can do judge analytics, which is an extremely useful gadget here and that Ravel has. You can see, here you have the opinion history, and then this will show you how the page is cited. So if you click on one of these, it will bring up an entire paragraph. Some of these are pretty voluminous, but it brings you the paragraph and summary of how this case has cited to our Coastal Oil and Gas Corp. You can highlight text that looks important. So you can go in here and, you can go in here and you can highlight. You can save notes in here. So you can type in notes. Let's see. So let's go back. I'll just cancel out of this. Let's go back and we can look to another case to look at our judge analytics. So if we go to another important case here, and you can see that this is a different court. So let's do that again just to show you. So that was a state court opinion. This is a district court opinion. So let's go to the district court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania for Barish. And we won't load that up right now. And here you see that there is judge analytics available. So again, you have the opinion history. You have the citations for the page. But let's click on, and I've already done that for you. Let's click on Judge Analytics over here. So you can see here that Judge Caputo has written almost 2,000 opinions. So obviously we don't want to look at all of Judge Caputo's opinions. So let's filter this. And let's do a good Boolean search, so oil or gas and energy. That will get us, I hope, anything to do with exploration and production. So then we'll apply this and we'll look at his entire history. And what was interesting there, and unfortunately we saw it in just a flash because I moved through too quickly maybe, but we saw habeas corpus. We saw a bunch of, when we had the filter down, we saw, and they're gone now of course, but we saw habeas corpus and some other interesting topics. Now we see things like Native American rights. Let's see if eminent domain comes up. I would bet that eminent domain is going to fall under some of these issues here, though I don't see it explicitly. Let's see. Get out of here. Okay. So here we have Judge Analytics, and you can see this filters down to 29 opinions. This is a really neat page. So you can see here court phrases, types of motions, keyword highlights, and decision highlights, and summaries. This is for Barish. Now we can go to, obviously we can look at different opinions that are under this filter. So these all have at least something to do with energy and oil or gas. We can go to, and you can click report on these, and this gives you a report for Judge Analytics. The other thing I have not mentioned is when you look at these cases, whether it be in a case, a particular search term, it will tell you, sorry I'm jumping around a bit, but it will tell you if you've previously viewed a case, if you haven't already tagged it or started. So if we go back to Judge Analytics, again, we can have this produce a report, and that looks, let's see, something like this. We can get back to this later. So this is a sample report that shows you a report from a particular judge that goes through some of the cases, some of the holdings, court phrases, motions, that type of thing. So here we can click on, so that was opinions. Here we can click on the Analytics tab. This is interesting because it actually, let's see. So this is a treatment of the opinions that Judge Caputo has written. So as you can see, it has all the different courts where it either started or as you can see here, finished. Pennsylvania Supreme Court or U.S. Supreme Court, where those cases have come from and gone. Let's see, if you click here on opinions, this is a list of opinions, and again, we can produce reports based on this. What would be very interesting, and this is something Kyle might be able to talk about, and I think Ravel is working on this, but it would be court analytics. So what would be extremely interesting is to see not just how Richard Caputo rules on a particular issue or type of case, but how the Middle District of Pennsylvania rules across judges. So that would be super helpful. But you can get to that. You can get at that question by limiting your search terms, limiting your searches to the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and then looking at your judge analytics and looking at how they have ruled. So it's something you can get at. So that's judge analytics. I think that's a particularly interesting feature and gadget for Ravel. So let's do a couple of specific searches. So let's get in here and let's go back and we'll do a different search for oil or gas. Again, we want to cast a wide net, and energy. Now, obviously, this is going to bring up a huge amount of cases. But then once we get in here, so it's thinking, once we get in here, I'd like to do some dives on related issues. So, for example, we'll take out trespass. This is going to be quite a bit, and we'll put in eminent domain. So we'll have thousands. So there you go, 33,000 cases. So let's filter this for eminent domain, and then let's look at the past 100 years, just to see how many we get. You know, sometimes old case law still rules. So let's see what this gives us. So 1,200 opinions, quite a bit to look through. Obviously, they're not all showing up here. So, and you can see there's a ton of Supreme Court cases that deal with this, including, you know, with regard to eminent domain. Now let's look at the past 10 years. And that should give us a lot more granularity in this search. Okay, good. And then we'll go to relevance. So as you can see, this is a great field of cases. You can learn quite a bit from looking through these cases. And one of the things that's particularly useful and interesting is as you go through, and anytime you do this legal research, you start learning about, it gives you, for example, primers on sort of the jurisdictional layer cake of energy production and distribution. So issues like right-of-way, pipelines, easements. If you're dealing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, you're dealing with Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, which is, you know, once you have that, that's when you see eminent domain come in. So, and again, remember, you'll need to zoom in time to see all this granularity of cases. So let's just look. Obviously, this is an important one, Columbia Gas Transmission, but for the sake of looking at this, I wanted to look at Smith versus Steckman. That was an interesting case just to look at because it discussed, and this was just looking at it, you know, found it through poking around. It was a district court opinion in the Western District, and it discusses underground property rights. And then through that, we actually found, and I'll see if I can find it again, we found an interesting case. There's a lot of interesting cases in here, but I'll try to keep it. There it is. So through that, we found an interesting citation to Northern Natural Gas versus LD Drilling. Again, looking at the connectivity of these cases, we found Northern Natural Gas, and this was a very interesting one because it discusses the Natural Gas Act and how that gives FERC jurisdiction over interstate natural gas commerce and transport. that natural gas storage is considered part of that infrastructure, but it does leave regulation of it to states for production and intrastate transport. So it talks to that jurisdictional aspect. This was also an incredibly interesting and important case for us to be looking at because, again, EAC does a lot of injection well stuff. We do things with Class 2 waste disposal and enhanced oil recovery wells. So we're always looking at different state laws beyond the federal laws that govern this type of activity. This was an interesting case because this was a nuisance-based claim. So that's an interesting ancillary issue that we're not accustomed to seeing. And the reason it was a nuisance is because oftentimes some of these states have more protective regulations for hydrocarbon-bearing zones than for interruption of, let's say, drinking water. So in this case, there was a lowering of pressure to the gas storage field owned by Northern Natural Gas by these surrounding, we'll call them nuisance wells, that were trying to extract gas on their own, and it was screwing up the pressure differential that potentially caused migration. Well, there's a lot of implications for migration of gas and fluids, and could potentially be used, that case law could potentially be used for contamination of public resources. And so, again, going through these types of cases and seeing how they're connected really does create a good field to look at to see what types of connections you can have and what types of interesting case law you can pull out of that. Another interesting way to look at this is to, and again, we'll keep the last 10 years, but we'll take out eminent domain, wait for that to filter. We found that another interesting way to look at these is to look for companies. So if you're thinking, okay, well, how are these, you know, how do I look at the field and how do I see how different complaints or issues are handled? So let's do oil and gas drilling. And I'd like here to look at to see which companies pop up as particularly bad actors. And there's one in particular I'm looking for. It's not coming up. Bear with me one moment. Maybe I'll put this in quotes. And then I'll search for the last 10 years, and I'll apply. Okay, here we go. So, range resources. So that was an interesting find that for anyone working in Pennsylvania or anyone working in fracking, they'll recognize range resources as sort of a quintessential bad actor. Lots of cases that come up. There have been contamination cases, spills, lawsuits. There have been complaints to DEP. There have been actions by DEP. So we thought this would be a great place to start. And then, you know, you want to also do things like Google searches and, you know, look at SEC filings to look for their for all their subsidiaries. So that way you could actually search. You can click on this. You can take this site, obviously put it right into the search bar and search just for cases with range resources, or, you know, you can use all the different names and use the Boolean searches for and or however you want to break that up. Then another interesting search that can be done for ancillary issues is if you want to filter by something like, so we'll bring the filter up, by something like drinking water. So let's try searching by Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be federal. That's federal. It could be state, so you could put in a state analog to that type of case. This brings up, of course, a particularly important one, Robinson Township versus Commonwealth. Now, this is the second iteration of that. This is a very recent 2016 case. Some interesting ones brought up by this is this Cascaden. Now, Cascaden was and you see here we've tagged it, that was not a very good outcome for several reasons. There were evidentiary hurdles and just other issues with that case, but it does provide an interesting evidentiary standard for showing that a water well has been contaminated by oil gas drilling and how you would have to show that, which they didn't, according to the court. But certainly, it had all the makings of an issue that arose after drilling, and it became a battle of the experts. So an important case to be reviewing. And so back to the Robinson Township case, I recently heard Maya Van Rossum discussing some really important issues that come up, and one of them is to use, or as best you can, use constitutional amendments. Pennsylvania is a really good example of that because its constitutional amendment is actually very strong. So it's the Environmental Rights Amendment, and Pennsylvania has a particularly, let's see if I can do the search, a particularly strong one. So let's search for, and I'll take the filters out so we're not distracted by those. I don't think we need a time frame, and I'll show you in a minute. Okay. See here, there's 381 opinions, and I did right to a clean, as in right to a clean environment, or right to clean, as in right to clean air or water. And I didn't want to limit it, so I put both in, and I didn't want to put in amendment or constitution so that it wasn't a distraction for the search terms. But you can see this is back in the 70s. It starts here, and it starts here in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is, again, it's a powerful one. It's self-executing, but you see across the country, you have Montana. You'll see here as you scroll through, you'll see Hawaii, that they have one. So several states have theirs, and that's a really interesting thing that you could research and click through. And again, I invite you to look at how Robinson Township used the Environmental Rights Amendment. It also came up in a couple of other cases, like Foundation versus Commonwealth. So, and you can always filter if you want to use these terms, and then filter by things like environment and constitution. Just a little tip: if you put in a word and you just want to have the end of that word searched, you just put an exclamation point before it ends, so that can give you environmentalist, or just environment. So that can give you all the iterations of that particular word in case you don't want to rule out cases that have that term in it. So that was all a mouthful. That was, I think, as best I could, put deep dives into some of the ancillary issues. And then part of what we want to do, and I know Parthen is going to talk about that a bit, but part of what we want to do is have these customized sample reports. What we intend to do is to have a bit of a synopsis at the beginning of it. So let's say leaders in the network will give us a particular request or a particular question, and we can do a quick synopsis, and then we get a report that lists all the relevant opinions based on our searches. Now, of course, the searches would be much more involved than just fracking. It would start big, like I said, oil or gas and energy, and then it would start to filter down through the filters I showed you. We'd pick out and showcase relevant cases. We could even include those or include their summaries. And then, if it's available, we would hope it was, but hope it is. But then we'd have judge analytics. So we would do a judge report. We'd do a report based on opinions, based on motions, based on that type of thing. And so, with that, I think I will turn it over to Parthena, and maybe after that we could get some explanation from Kyle. But maybe Parthena can start to talk about some feedback and potential use of Ravel reports in the network.
Sure. Thanks, David. That was really great. And I totally understand, as someone who is not an attorney myself, I think this is a lot of information, but I think that's a good segue to, what I want to share with everyone on the call here. for those of you who might have tons of legal experience but not in the way of kind of that formal training that a lot of attorneys do. And so we've been working together to develop, this is just a screenshot, but develop a form that makes it a little easier for you to explain, for users and leaders in the network to explain what exactly are you looking for, what is kind of the fight that you're fighting, what is the struggle that you have currently, and to help guide you through that process, and so we can help use the tool to help you in a better way without having you, need to be an expert in all of the terminology and that type of thing. So this is just a screenshot. We're still finalizing this, but this form will be distributed to everyone who registered. And as David mentioned before, we are launching, this is kind of our launch of this pilot service. And I emphasize the word pilot because we're going to work with up to 5 different leaders using this tool to work with you to create a custom report, kind of like the one that David mentioned earlier, but there's a few other different, there's opinion reports, judge analytics, and that type of thing, different kinds of reports. So I'll be sending around an interest and request form tomorrow or the day after, where you can submit what kind of information you're looking for, and if it helps, for the pilot, for in the case of the pilot, we'll definitely work with you a lot more deeper one-on-one. So we actually do have a few questions already up in queue here. So the first one is from Jessa. It's, for me, legal rhetoric can be tough. Totally understand, and this actually chimes in well with what I just said. Does Ravel have a glossary of legal terms, etc., available on the site?
So yeah, I'll go ahead and take this portion here. A little bit of technical background people might be seeking. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to learn a little bit about the Ravel platform. We're always very appreciative of an attentive and willing audience. So thank you for that. In regard to legal terms, that's a good question. And the short answer is no. Unfortunately, really the only sort of terminology we're going to provide is the handy bowling terms and connector guide that David briefly described. But I've been diligently taking notes. That's a really interesting idea. And the reason I say that is, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but part of what we're doing here at Ravel is helping to make the law more available and more open to the public, not just to this rather esoteric group of attorneys and legal researchers, and obviously your world of academia up in the ivory tower. So that is a really great idea, and it's something that I will certainly pass along to our product team, because one of the things we also like to emphasize here at Ravel is we do value user feedback. It is because of some direct asks that we've been able to build out the platform, especially touching on something David said with the collaborative nature of the platform. The report building, for instance, that was a direct customer ask. People want to be able to work more together, utilizing the Ravel platform, so they asked for report building, so we built that out for them, and now that's going to be scattered throughout the site, as well as being able to share certain parts of the platform with colleagues via a direct URL link. So that is a great question. I wish we could do that right now, but we're not quite there yet. But we'll try and incorporate some terms throughout. Any other questions?
Yeah, and actually, just before I move on to the next question, I just want to add to what Kyle said. Jessa, one of the reasons why Halt the Harm decided to work really closely with David and Hannah and the other folks at Environmental Action Center with this tool is because they're also leaders of the network, as are you and everyone else on this call. And so I think we really wanted to make sure that there was a point of collaboration, and the way that we're really looking forward to going forward with the pilot is that we, for example, if you're someone who would be interested in getting a report for a particular case that you're working on, or you're working with a community member that's dealing with a particular issue that would need kind of legal support and legal advice, we would connect you to David and Hannah to work with you one-on-one to really figure out what exactly it is that you need, and you can explain in your own terms, and they would be able to kind of help I don't know if the word translate is the best word, but to kind of bridge that connection between you and the tool. So that's something, I guess, in the immediate timeline, we can work on working with you one-on-one on that. The next question we have here from Claire. It is, why is it important to see how other cases cite a particular case with case analytics?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I guess I will admit, first and foremost, I do have a legal background myself, so I'll try not to be too professorial or too technical. But in essence, the U.S., we live in a common law jurisdiction, so it's this idea, this notion that one case or one piece of case law, it doesn't sit in this static universe by itself. It's involved in a citation network. I think we illustrate that very well in the search visualization component of the platform, the bubbles connected by lines, and that's really further, I think, hammered home with the case analytics. So you are able to see directly how later judges are interpreting the case that you're reading. And that becomes important because we want to know perhaps one case overturned another case. Maybe one case gives a prior case some sort of specific treatment or creates some sort of multi-pronged test. But simply put, it's because of the common law jurisdiction that we live in. And I think case analytics does a really good job of allowing the researcher to quickly and easily see how, on a page-by-page breakdown, how the case you're looking at is used in the future, and that's vital.
If I could shade that in a little bit for the audience. So thanks, Kyle. I do want to say, with those citations and those analytics, and perhaps I'm, for some maybe I'm stating the obvious. For others, I think it's important conceptually. As everybody knows, the highest courts dictate case precedent. So the more we know about how a case is cited or how many times it's been cited and by which court, there's more and more and more confines, and it constricts judges' decisions. So if you are in if you're in a district court in Middle District of Pennsylvania, which is federal, you are constrained by the Supreme Court making a decision on a particular issue. So the reason I mention that is because, and the same with the state level, if you're in Pennsylvania Supreme Court and you're in the Court of Common Pleas, well, that judge is constrained by decisions on a particular issue by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, by and large. And so the more citation information you have and the more other cases are citing to your case, they are relying on these sort of more powerful, persuasive decisions that have been made, whether they, if it's a higher court than that's the law of the land. If it's a court that's at approximately the same level, then it's persuasive. So it's really important to know how cases are cited.
Great, thanks all. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and mute everyone, or unmute everyone who's on the call. So if anyone has any questions, there's a little bit of background noise. But you can also ask a question in the bottom right-hand corner in the chat box. Or you can also raise your hand. You can click on the icon. It's a hand icon. If anyone has any other questions. All right, well, we have one question here, and that is, how does Ravel compare with other legal research platforms that you've used?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely a challenge that I put up. It's a question, rather, I should say, that I get asked very often, almost every day. And so, really, I think there's a couple main differences, and I'm sure I could go on all evening about this, but I'll try and keep it very concise. So the first and foremost is with Ravel, we are bringing some of the big buzzwords of the technology world to the practice of law. So part of our mission and part of the reason why this company was founded by two law school classmates is because they saw a technological gap in the practice of law and specifically case law research. You know, up to this point in time, the biggest innovation to legal research was when Westlaw and Lexis, the two big power players of the legal research market, they essentially digitized their library, their collection, their volumes, and they put a really basic search filter to it. And for going on 30 years, that was the big technological improvement. So what our co-founders wanted to do was to bring this much needed technological upgrade to the practice of law. So what we're doing is we're using, like, you know, some of those big buzzwords: artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing. This is the existing technologies that are out there that almost every other industry, whether it be marketing, whether it be inventory management, whether it be customer relationship management, the list goes on and on and on, sales forecasting, etc. And we're bringing that technology to the practice of law. So that's the first thing, is really I think the big technological upgrade that we're providing. And also too, on a slightly different note is, and you know, I'm sorry that Hannah wasn't able to join us, because she made a great point that you know I wanted to really just repeat. And simply put, we are making legal research easier and faster. And more importantly, Ravel is discovering case law that other tools miss. And especially if you're a practicing attorney, a practicing litigator, that can be a game changer. That can be I keep my job, I don't keep my job, my firm closes, my firm doesn't close, or you know, even more importantly, my client loses, or they don't, or they win. So we're making legal research quicker and easier, and you know, it's very fun to see the way that, especially the judge analytics tools and our other analytical suite of software, how it's making the practice of law finally, you know, catch up with the 21st century.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, we have another question here, and I guess it's a two-part question, but I think
Okay.
I can answer one part, and you guys can answer the other. Probably Kyle can better answer the other. So the question is from Jenny: who funds Ravel, and is Ravel accessible to everyone? And I was just going to put it out there to everyone on the call, to the second part of the question, which is Ravel accessible to everyone? So one of the things that we're working out with Ravel and our friends at Environmental Action Center is working with them to figure out how we can really provide Ravel Law as a potential tool and service next year for halt the harm leaders to be at no cost. And so that's kind of one of the things that we're working with Ravel and our partners at Environmental Action Center on. But I guess just in terms of general education and your company, I guess, Kyle, could you take the first one, which is who funds Ravel?
Yes. So I just want to say one more small thing on the second part of the question. Anybody today can go and create an absolutely free Ravel Law account with their email address. Go to our website. We actually even provide you a 7-day free trial of our advanced level features, which was the search visualization and the case analytics, so that anyone who wants to go check us out, feel free to create an account, and you know, you can have at it until later arrangements are made. As far as the funding goes, you know, we are first and foremost, we are an NEA-backed venture here in the Silicon Valley area. We're located in San Francisco, and so as far as funding goes, it's really it's venture capital, it's angel investment, and we actually are, you know, as most technology companies in this area are, we're actively seeking the next round of investment. So that's hopefully that addressed that question in enough detail.
Awesome. So we only have a few more minutes left. I don't see any other questions in the queue. However, this isn't your last chance to ask a question. There'll be a survey at the end of this where you can add any comments and let us know what you think. If you have any other suggestions, for example, I think the word bank was a great suggestion. Let us know there. You can also email us. But I just wanted to see if either David or Kyle had anything that they wanted to say before we closed out.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. You know, if there's any questions that are related to product or technology, and you know, I'm sure I'll receive those from everyone we spoke with today. So just want to thank you again for your time.
Awesome. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have left. But again, you know, if you have any other questions, feel free to add it in the survey, which is coming up. It should pop up when you exit, or actually, it might come. Actually, it might come up in the email. But I just want to thank David and Kyle today for sharing with us their findings and how the tool works. I think it was really, really interesting. And just thanks so much for taking the time to present, and also thank everyone on the call for taking the time to join us and participate in the evening. So shoot me an email if you have any questions. Also, if you have suggestions for the next webinar. This webinar is part of a series that we do in partnership with Stop the Frack Attack over the course of the year. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we're working on developing new ideas for what we want to work on next year. So now is definitely the time to hit me up if you have any ideas. And I just have our organization URLs down at the bottom. You can check us out, helpharm.net. You can check out environmentalactioncenter.org. And you can check out Stop the Frack Attack at stopthefrackattack.org. So thanks everyone again, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. Good night, everyone.